Good afternoon and welcome back to the Hibs Observer. I'm Liam Bryce, joined by Matty Fernie to discuss all the latest from Easter Road after what I must say has been a very eventful week at Hibs, but aren't they all, you might say. So Matty, first things first, thank you as always for joining us. How are you getting on?
I'm good, thanks. I'm trying to figure out how you managed to get that wee intro in at the start of the video and thinking whether or not I could nick something similar for for ours.
Well, I mean, all I was told to do is you press this button and it plays. So that's about the extent of my capability with these kind of things. To be honest, I'm sure there is something more technical behind it, but thankfully I don't have to deal with that. So just before we get going, folks, just usual word for our sponsor, Good Vibes Giveaways. They're proud to sponsor the Hibs Observer and offer fantastic prizes to fans of the club. Prizes change weekly and include tech and gadgets, days out, weekends away, tax-free cash, and even Oasis tickets. So get your tickets now at goodvibesgiveaways.com and enter for your chance to spread the good vibes. So, Matty, as I said, an eventful week at Hibs. I think for fans, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, a bit of confusion at points as well, I would imagine. So, I mean, even if we go back to Saturday, to last weekend, we'll no bother going over the game, folks. If you missed the sort of full breakdown of that, Patrick and Craig covered that on the YouTube channel earlier in the week. But sort of more so, I think, on the reaction to it and what's come after. I said I wasn't there at Easter Road last week, but by all accounts, it seemed to get pretty poisonous, the atmosphere in the stands. Obviously, there was videos going around at the end, and so I mean, were you at the game? I'd imagine you'd come away from that feeling pretty deflated, pretty frustrated. What was your kind of overriding take on it all?
Yeah, all of the above. Yeah, I was there. I kind of went in quite optimistic about how the game was going to go. To be fair, I looked at the lineup, thought it looked all right, and there's loads of noise in the press about the players, Martin Boyle going to run through walls for the manager, and Joe Newell talk about how the players need to do a bit more. And then you saw the game, and the players just never really turned up. In the first half was an absolute shambles, and the reaction, it was really bad. I mean, you look at a supporter that's not in sync with the team, and that's what you see at Easter Road just now. There's not a great connection between the two. I don't think the fans are seeing that the players are given as much as the fans are on the pitch. That's certainly how it appears. And even that sort of late flurry is that the team kind of almost got back into it with the disallowed equaliser.
Yeah.
I don't think that would have left people leaving on a high, even if that had been even if it had been given. I think there was enough anger. I mean, there was people around us leaving before half time when the second goal went in. Even more when Boyle misses a penalty. I mean, it was almost like an inevitable outcome when Boyle was stepping up to. I said to my son at the time, "Is it shades of Jack Ross's last game at Livingston, where Boyle also missed a penalty?" And I think the general consensus we were coming down for the main stand was people really thought that was probably David Gray's last game in charge.
Yeah, aye. I think that feeling was, as I said, I wasn't at the game, but kind of following afterwards and in the days following, you did kind of get that set. A lot of people seemed quite sort of resigned, if you like. I don't know if that's the right word, but kind of maybe expecting that it was potentially the end of the road for David Gray, given how things were going. Just you talk about that, I think you made a good point about how even if that equaliser had stood, that it probably wouldn't have changed the feeling all that much. So I suppose it's this frustration and the anger and everything we've seen that goes beyond just a single 90 minutes, doesn't it? That is part of something that's maybe been building and it's part of a broader issue then, isn't it?
Yeah, and we're talking about it building probably since Jack Ross was sacked. Really, I mean, we had a brief glimmer of light under Lee Johnson, which kind of tells you how brief the glimmer of light was when we had the top six finished. But other than that, it's been fairly steady decline. The recruitment gets worse and worse. The decision making at the club gets worse and worse, and the performances are getting worse and worse. And we're rooted at the bottom of the league. Every time one of these games comes along and we're talking about maybe getting a bit of a run together, it's not happening. We're getting another slap in the face, and I think we are. Saturday felt like a tipping point with it, where people were just kind of went, like, we've had enough of this now, and yeah, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, and it has been coming for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, obviously, generally in these situations, a lot of it tends to fall on the manager. And obviously, I think there's no way that David Gray himself would try and kind of escape any scrutiny or blame for how things are going on the pitch. But I think would it be fair to say that the sort of bulk of the anger now is it has been directed elsewhere?
Yeah, I think Gray's in an unfortunate position of having inherited a mess and not necessarily been given the tools to improve it. So I don't think recruitment has been great, although Gray's had a role in that as well. And we had a conversation on our podcast earlier in the week to say, like, if it wasn't David Gray, if it was another that was in place, what we would be saying about them and how we would be judging his time in charge. And I think there's definitely lots of learning points for David Gray and lots of points where he could have done better. But I think ultimately you look at the root cause is not David Gray. The root cause is the people running the club, the decisions that have been made. You go back to Brian McDermott getting appointed and making no difference. The amount of decisions and strategies that they've taken that they've just veered away from at the first sign of it not working. There's a whole load of reasons why we're in the shape that we're in. And David Gray is probably just the almost the fall guy for being the last one in to try and address it.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously there are these larger issues, but, kind of the issue at hand right now is that Hibs are bottom of the league after 12 games, one win from those 12 games, some really kind of sore defeats like Saturday, a couple of, I would be hesitate to even say, there's been a couple of false dawns because that hasn't, not even results-wise, there's maybe been the odd wee glimmer of, right, okay, maybe they could build on this, but a bit of the performance, but it's, I suppose, like, how worried are you now? I mean, that's us through. I know it's not played. I think played every single team in the league yet, but that is a full 12 fixtures. It's how concerned are you getting about the situation?
Really concerned. Aberdeen are the team that we've not played.
Yes, Aberdeen.
and you look at the season they're having, so it's not like we've got a gimme there where there's 3 points. I think it's a bleak situation. The big concern for me, Liam, is that Saturday's game was like in the must-win category, and the players recognised it was must-win. Though the talk going into it was all about how we needed to get results, and the performance just didn't match it. And I think if you're in that position where, like, the team are slow out the blocks, there was no sign that this was a team that was absolutely fighting tooth and nail to get out of the position that they were in. There was just an acceptance and they did rally a wee bit, but it was after David Gray had sort of rolled the dice with changes, bringing in players that have been nowhere near the first team so far.
Yeah,
and also you say St Mirren sat back a wee bit. They were 2-0 up and absolutely comfortable in the game, so they were quite happy to let us get on the ball. So there was a little bit of a lift in performance, but it was nowhere near enough.
Yeah.
And I think
sorry, no, continue.
If you're in that position and you're not able to lift the players, I don't know what's going to change for the next game. And you might think that with the bit of a reprieve that David Gray's had, that the players might say, we've got another opportunity to go and save his job. And I just hope to take this one because every single opportunity that they've had so far, they've let it slide.
Yeah. And I noted kind of Nicky Cadden speaking after the game saying, it's not a case that we don't care. I mean, I suppose I can imagine your answer is probably going to be that it's a multitude of issues all coming together. But I think for, just this run of games in particular, like, where are you putting the sort of bulk of the sort of blame or the explaining for these issues? Do you think it's I know you've kind of alluded to it a wee bit, but do you think the primary issue is players not given enough? Is it the players who are being brought in that the recruitment, again, has not been good enough? Is it David Gray, how he's setting up the team, tactics? Is it a bit of everything for you?
Yeah, I think there is an element. I suppose that's kind of the cop-out answer, but I think if I was to prioritise issues, recruitment's number one. I think we've got a team with an out-and-out goal scorer. I saw a table earlier in the week that had us third in the league for expected goals, but I think we're bottom of the league for goals scored. And I know there's a couple of penalties in there, so it's a wee bit skewed, but we missed those penalties. You should still consider them. We've got a goalkeeper that doesn't really make saves. So if you're not functioning at either end of the pitch, then you're going to have problems, and that's where we are. I don't think necessarily we've settled into a style of play that you would say that's what a Hibs team looks like. On really any level, there's no single attribute you would give to this team other than negative ones that identify how we play. So recruitment tactics. I'm not convinced the players are especially well coached because nobody seems to be getting better. And no one area of the team seems to be getting better. And, just mental decisions like bringing in Chiantis, who's a centre half, and making him your number 6 for the season. Like things like this, could we not have gone and got a sort of time served number 6 to come in? It's things like this that you kind of question the logic for doing it, and when you piece it all together, it's not really a surprise that we're struggling as much as we are.
Yeah, it's a perfect storm at the moment. It seems to be. It is like I know this is not to excuse anything, but like it's. I think the way the game finished on Saturday with the offside goal, it's just it is descended into one of those things where everything that can go wrong is going wrong at this moment in time.
100%, yeah, absolutely.
Just Andrew, maybe a comment here saying it's all about poor recruitment. It's not exclusively in the summer, but there are concerns with individuals there. Gray can't get any consistency or change wildly as there is no real tangible options that haven't stepped up previously. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's spot on there. And that goes back to what we were saying about the subs. I mean, we're relying on Rocky Bashiri, Dylan Levitt, Harry McCurdy. I mean, these are players that I don't think have a long-term future at the club. They probably know they don't have a long-term future at the club. And yet, David Gray's had to turn to them because the guys that he did want to have a long-term future at the club are letting him down. So it's a bad position to be in, really. And it comes down to recruitment, ultimately.
I'm not like, I know this is maybe 2020 hindsight in a way, but I was kind of concerned at times when I could see, because the turn into guys like Levitt and Rocky who haven't really played, that didn't just start that weekend there. I think that's over a kind of number of weeks that Gray has almost been kind of forced choosing whatever side of the fence you come down on to kind of almost just throw guys in. And, Duke Del Hayes came in for an appearance in the Derby, Nathan Mariah Welsh, and then like not seen again. So it's like it feels like a manager just trying to see if he can get something out of these players, but it feels it had the subs and stuff like that. That's something I felt has been a wee bit scattergun for a wee while.
Yeah, and I think the Saturday was probably the first time that I would say we've seen Gray making subs to affect the game rather than to manage sort of minutes or fitness. Like his subs tend to all sort of fall around about the same time. It's similar positions that he's replacing each week. And I think on Saturday, you look at he replaced O'Hora, who'd made the mistake. And I think he was just like, right, I've said we can't carry on making mistakes. Quan and Chiantis came off. Boyle was subbed pretty much as soon as he missed the penalty. I think that was just like a manager going, I'm not having this anymore, and I have to be seen to be doing something about it.
Yeah, he was going for broke at that point. He'd nothing really left to lose, I suppose. Just coming on to the kind of wider reaction and kind of what followed in the few days after the game. Obviously, there was kind of intense speculation that was that going to be the end for David Gray. Kind of rumours flying around, but on Monday evening, the club came out with a statement. I'm sure everybody's seen it already, but I'll just batter through it for anybody who needs a wee reminder. The statement from the board said, "We're disappointed with the result, with the poor start to our current season. Like all Hibernian FC supporters, following the weekend result, we've held discussions as a group addressing how we move forward. We continue to work tirelessly in our quest to improve our performance and achieve the results we need on the pitch. Through this challenging time, we support our head coach David Gray and his management team. All departments are under pressure to deliver. We recognise that this is a hard time for our supporters and we know we can do better. Together with Black Knight Football Club, we are working hard to make that happen." So, Matty, when the statement came out and when you read it, what was your initial thoughts?
I was surprised initially about the decision. I mean, if you'd been kind of had your ear to the ground through the day, all the noises were the decision had been taken to sack Gray. So when the statement came out, it was a bit of a surprise. But I thought the statement really said nothing. It's kind of just a bit of word salad, isn't it? Like you've got, we'll try harder. Everyone needs to be doing a wee bit better, and we'll stick by the manager. it felt very much like a stay of execution. It is very similar to when we missed out on top 6 last season and they put the statement out about Montgomery, and I think he was away 3 games later. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case with David Gray. We've got 3 tough games coming up. I think if we perform badly in those ones, I think that will be curtains. I think it was very much a stay of execution. It would have been good to have got maybe like a wee bit more detail on what they're doing about it. Like trying hard is great, but we would trying hard sort of what we would expect as a business as usual position. We know about Garvin Stewart, for example, coming up from Bournemouth. That's been reported. So, some of that kind of detail to say that we're working with Black Knight, but what does that look like, and what are the sort of? I mean, they're not going to go into real specifics, but like a sort of high level overview to say have some comfort we're actually doing something about it.
Yeah. I think because I know that clubs are, and when they put out these statements out there, they're never going to give away like the state secrets, if you like. It's not the kind of the minute details of it. But I think you've got a point there, and it almost reminds me of Ian Gordon's interview a couple of months ago when. I mean, again, I think that it was fair play for Ian Gordon coming out and taking as many questions as he did. But I think if there was one criticism from that, I know we're getting back off topic a wee bit of a tangent, but it was that, I think there was a lot of lessons have been learned. We're working hard to fix it. But then, as you say there, it's the how. I think people want to, what are you doing to try and fix it? I think that's where people want a bit more, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think Hibs miss a trick with this sort of messaging because there's clearly a lot of anger amongst the support and a lot of frustration. More worrying for Hibs is a lot of apathy as well. I think there's a lot of folk who are just switching off altogether. But there feels like there's a really good news story there to be told if Hibs wanted to tell it. And this idea that we've made the mistakes and we're getting help to go and fix it, it would almost let them draw a line under what's gone before, like to say, we've been rubbish up till now, we've made these mistakes, actually we're not going to be the ones making the decisions going forward, we're getting help for these guys in these areas, so it's not going to be like we're going to win the next game 3-0 because we've made the changes, but actually it's going to be like a more positive journey from here on in, give us a bit of space and time to do it. Folk would probably be a bit more willing to get behind it. But they just, I don't know, it's like secret squirrel society. They don't want to kind of share this information, and I think that's where the frustration comes in, because you just see really what looks like just kind of a long run of incompetence, and it's not great for the outside looking in.
Yeah, and what you say about the fans there, I would probably, I don't know if you agree, but I think in a lot of ways apathy can actually be more dangerous.
100%,
than anger, couldn't it?
Yeah, definitely, because folk will stop going, and then it hits the club in the pocket, and we didn't really want to be in that position.
No, absolutely not. So, I mean, I suppose, when it comes to the statement, do you agree with the decision to back David Gray at this point? I suppose that there's maybe 2 separate issues here. You can be dissatisfied with the statement, but also think that Gray does still deserve more time to turn it around. It's not a black and white issue in that sense. I mean, where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I think he needs more time. I think if you take the stance that he's been let down by recruitment, and he's only 12 league games in, which is no real time to judge a manager. There has been, a horrendous run of results, and there's no escaping it. But I think if you know that there are factors that are outside of his control that have played into it, they give him the chance to turn it around. If they've got support coming in to help him, let's see how he does with that help and give him that time and backing to do it. I think if you pull the trigger now, how long does the next guy get? Like if he comes in and he's not won in his first 8 games, do we then say, well, we need to sack him, and then the next guy comes in and we give them less time, because each time it comes in, it's harder to turn it around. So
yeah,
we're part of the way through that journey with David Gray just now. I would be inclined to give him time to see it out.
Yeah, because as you say, like every time you sack another manager, then the pressure on the club and the people making the decisions, it's already happened 5 years. It's that would go through the roof, really, wouldn't it? If another manager was to be seen off.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we become less and less credible with each manager that we exit as well, which is the other thing. So I'm not sure what the pool of candidates was like when we recruited David Gray. But But I don't remember hearing tons and tons of rumours about this name being in the frame and that name being in the frame. And I think sitting at the bottom of the league, having if you choose to sack the manager after 12 games at that point, trying to get somebody credible in. Like there was a lot of clamour to get Derek McInnes, for example, when David Gray got the job. Can you imagine going to Derek McInnes just now and asking him to leave Kilmarnock to come to Easter Road? I mean, he would laugh you out of the room because, we're a shambles. So it's just an awful position to be in. I mean, Hibs have kind of shot themselves in the foot so many times, and now they're like, I don't really see how much option they've got other than to stick with Gray.
Yeah. Yep. I get you. Not much positivity to go around at the moment, but I mean, I suppose if we're going to look for signs of change, then obviously the news coming out this week that Hibs are set to turn to Bournemouth's Garvin Stewart to get involved in the recruitment operation. It's at least then a sign that things are changing, I suppose, in that sense. Obviously, Stewart, he's worked down at Bournemouth. He's been brought in with a view to overhauling the first team squad. There's obviously the recruitment issues have been, well identified. Just our story earlier in the week, he's expected to be named as the new head of recruitment as part of significant changes to the player identification department ahead of what is going to be another summer of change. Obviously, there's 15 players out of contract at the end of next season. We've got that looming large on the horizon. I think actually I meant to touch on that issue with you earlier on, that having that amount of players out of contract next season, like even subconsciously, does that have an effect on how guys, if guys who know they're not going to be here next season, I think there's got to be at least some sort of subconscious effect on how you go about your business if you know that you're not going to be at a club in a few months' time. I know that there was all kind of talk about, they can have this big clear out next summer, this big overhaul. That's when you'll see the real changes. But I think, you need to get to that summer unscathed, or unscathed as much as possible. So just before we come back to Stewart, because I meant to ask you about that, do you see that as a contributing factor at the moment, or am I maybe overplaying it?
No, I think it plays into it. And what you would hope is that players know they're putting themselves in the shop window. If they know they're not going to be at Hibs, they're going to have to be somewhere. And if they don't want to drop down divisions massively or cut their pay massively, then really they need to be performing well enough that a team wants to come in and get them. But I think there are some players who are so far out of the picture that that's never going to happen. But the problem we've got is when you're then bringing those players in as your last chance saloon players, the motivation probably isn't there for them to dig the manager out of a hole. But also they don't have that connection with the club. They know they're not going to be there. And I suppose it plays into also like our goalkeeper, our centre forward, and our two central midfielders are loan players who are also not going to be at the club next season. So that sort of motivation to not have to spend the season in the Scottish Championship if you're on a 2 or 3 year contract at Hibs isn't there, because they know they're going to go back to their home clubs irrespective of how the team does. So we're probably impacting it in some way at least.
Aye, sorry, just back to that was a wee tangent I went off on there, but I didn't mean to ask you about that earlier on. There's just so much to cover at the moment. There's so many different strands to this. I've no doubt I'll divert onto something else in a couple of minutes. But just going back to Garvin Stewart, but being set to be brought in with a view to overhauling the recruitment. I think there's been a kind of few stories lately about trying to strengthen ties with the Black Knight Group. I know that the club have been actively trying to do that. Obviously, we all know what happened in the summer with Bill Foley coming out and expressing his dissatisfaction with some of the decisions that were made. So now it definitely, it's clear that the club are trying to. Obviously, the club said at the time there was no kind of fracture. They were insistent in the relationship, but it seems now that we are seeing kind of more of what the relationship could become. Obviously, Ben Kedgley and Ian Gordon went out to Las Vegas for a meeting. Tim Bezbachenko was up at Easter Road the other week. I know he's been been around the training ground in regular contact with the likes of Malky Mackay. So, I mean, is this more of what you want to see, that the Black Knight Group having more of an influence on the way the club is being run, certainly on the football side?
Yeah, definitely. I think what we have seen is that the setup that Hibs have had over the last few years has failed. and it hasn't really shown any signs of improvement. So if you look at how Bournemouth are doing, or you look at like Auckland are off to a great start to their season, Lorient, although they were relegated last season, I think they're sitting second in their league at the moment. There's definitely a body of evidence building to show that the Black Knights know what they're doing. And I think for us to be successful in a multi-club model, you have to participate as part of that model. You can't act on your own, which I think Hibs had been trying to do. So I think if we're going to get the benefit of it, we need to let these people in. We need to see what we can get from the other teams, whether it's literal players coming in, or whether it's expertise or things like somebody that knows what they're doing with the data analysis, etc. And I think this is probably the first proper evidence of the relationship sort of moving forward.
Yeah, I think you might. I think that was a point you made a while ago, maybe even back during the summer. But it was just you were kind of hinted at it there. I think you were at the time. You maybe said that you weren't necessarily against Hibs doing what they thought was best for the club at the time by hiring David Gray. But I think you did have that concern back then that it was the kind of first major decision to be made since well, maybe not counting Nick Montgomery being sacked, but in terms of moving forward from that. And it was the first sort of decision that they were, probably going to be consulted on and being involved in. I think you had those concerns back then about not. I think the phrase you used there was like not participating in the stable type thing.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that the statement reflected that Black Knights were unanimous with the board about backing David Gray, because that was the decision where they disagreed on. Wasn't it David and Malky? So I think to have that unity there, and I think they've obviously accepted, well, that's who we've got, and we need to try and make it work. But I suspect if you're Bill Foley, you're sitting back looking at it, and it's going to be almost impossible to not feel that you're going to get listened to the next time, because you say, well, you did it your way, look what happens. Yeah. It gives him much more credibility going forward. I mean, I don't know who they had lined up. Because that person could have gone into a job and failed massively where they are, and maybe Ian and Ben would be able to kind of point to that. But I think Bill Foley's hand was definitely strengthened by letting, because they didn't really have any choice, but by Ben and Ian doing their own thing and it sort of falling on its backside.
Yep, aye. So we'll see what happens with that moving forward. But I mean, do you kind of? I suppose the thing with Gavin Stewart coming in, obviously Bournemouth great track record in terms of recruitment. Does that at least give you some optimism? I know it doesn't necessarily. It's maybe not going to, depending on how heavily involved he is come the January transfer window, might be able to make a difference there. But it's a long term move, that isn't it? It's to try and fix long term. It might not necessarily fix what's happening right now, but it is possibly a sort of more positive long-term step, is it? If we're going to try and finish on some sort of positive to take.
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely going to help. My concern is that Hibs are still limited by their standing, and in the food chain of football, that Gavin could come in and identify these great players, but he's not going to be the only data analyst who's spotting these players. The big clubs all have sort of similar roles, they all have access to similar data, and then you're really kind of coming down to the quality of the analysts and picking out the gems from it. So it's how do we attract these players to Hibs? And really what needs to happen for me is that's where you lean into the relationship with Bournemouth, who are further up, and whether Hibs fans like it or not, in terms of financially, they're further up the food chain than Hibs are. And you maybe look to see if they can sign the players and then give them to us for a wee while to kind of manage it that way. So I think it'll have an impact. How much of an impact, I think, still remains to be seen, because I still think we have that limitation of who we are and where we stand in the game.
Yeah, exactly. It's very much remains to be seen. But I think for now, we're going to leave it there. Obviously, no game for the men's team this weekend, but it's the women's Edinburgh Derby on Sunday. So still some Hibs over the weekend for yourselves, folks. But we'll be back at the start of next week as we build into the return of the Scottish Premiership. So, Matty, thank you as always, for joining us, folks. Thank you for joining us as well. If you're watching us on YouTube, please do consider hitting the subscribe button to help us continue to grow the channel. It's completely free, and if you do so, you'll get a notification every time we go live. So we do appreciate that, folks. On top of that, I hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll speak to you very soon. Cheers.